Hello, it's me Romulus, and welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to talk about an app that a lot of people have been talking about for about a year at this point. And if you already read the title, then you know what I'm going to be talking about. That's right, it's Nintendo Music. As of October 31st, it has officially been 1 year since the app first launched, so I thought it'd be fun to take a look back over the last year and ask ourselves, is it really worth it 1 year later? Let's dive right in. So, first off, what is Nintendo Music? For those of you who are unaware, Nintendo Music is a music streaming app launched by, you guessed it, Nintendo. It contains a bunch of soundtracks from their 40 plus year long history of games, and it is available to anyone with a Nintendo Switch Online subscription. When the app first launched on October 31st, there were a meager 23 soundtracks available on the service, but Nintendo promised free updates would be coming regularly. Since then, the number of soundtracks has grown to 111 as of the recording of this video. That being said, not all soundtracks are created equal, and with that, so what is the NES cluster? Luckily for y'all, I have made a spreadsheet of every single soundtrack added to the app since it first launched, as well as a graph showing when it first launched versus today. The NES cluster is what I call this massive amount of NES games. You see, Nintendo Music separates all of their soundtracks by console, and the NES by far has the most amount of soundtracks added to the service of any console. It even has more than the Switch, which is insane to me. One reason for this is because on July 21st, 26 different soundtracks from the NES were added all at once. This is the most amount of soundtracks ever added to this service at once. However, the problem is that none of these are soundtracks. They're all just sound effects. Take golf, for example. In the soundtrack, there are a total of 10 tracks, but it's only a minute long altogether. Why is that? What could possibly be the cause of this short soundtrack, even though there's 10 songs? It's because none of them are actual songs. There isn't even a jingle here, it's just sound effects, and most of them sound the same too. It's all just the golf sound effect. I wouldn't consider this a soundtrack, yet it got an official release just like Mario Wonder. You could easily say that I am nitpicking, but it's like this for pretty much all 26 NES games they added. Like F1 Race has 4 tracks and none of them are songs. Duck Hunt, 9 tracks and no songs. Pinball, 2 tracks and no songs. Tennis, baseball, etc. You get the picture. It is pretty unfortunate, but this has also helped ensure that these games didn't get added by themselves on different weeks. However, I would argue that these shouldn't have been added to begin with. Since then, Nintendo has really stayed away from adding new NES games onto this app. The only one they've added since then is Zelda 2, and that was pretty substantial for an NES game. It had like 20 different songs in it, so pretty impressive altogether. Anyways, let's move on to the next subject I want to talk about. So, a few months ago, on August 19th, Sakurai hosted a Kirby Air Riders Direct, where he showed off a bunch of new features for the game. In the Direct, he also announced that a few select songs from Kirby Air Riders would be releasing the same day. They called it a special release. Now, at the time, this was really awesome. Wow, we get a sneak peek from some of the songs from the game, and it hasn't even come out yet. Thanks for that, Nintendo. However, this did not go exactly how we thought it would. A few weeks later, on September 18th, Nintendo did another special release for Donkey Kong Bananza, and this included a handful of songs from that game as well. This was a promotional release to celebrate the release of Emerald Rush mode. However, at this point, Bananza had been out for 2 months, and the entire soundtrack was already available on YouTube thanks to several different channels uploading the whole thing. Why would they not just release the whole thing right out of the gate? It felt a little tone deaf to not release the whole thing on the app, especially since it would be a great way to market both the app and the game itself. Many people have said this was done to avoid spoiling the game for people since it's so new. However, that doesn't really make sense considering there's a spoiler prevention toggle under settings. All you have to do is go into settings, scroll down to spoiler prevention, and set any games you want to censor. So this theory that Nintendo didn't release the Bananza soundtrack for spoiler reasons doesn't really hold water to me. The true reason will probably never come to light, and Nintendo probably doesn't want to tell us anytime soon anyways. That being said, I think Nintendo was being really dumb here in my opinion. I think they should have added the soundtrack the same day as the game's release as a special promotion, and I think they should have done the same thing with Mario Kart World. The fact that Mario Kart World has never even come to the app in the first place, in my opinion, should be considered a crime. I really hope Nintendo adds both of these soundtracks at some point soon. Anyways, let's move on to the next thing I'd like to talk about. So, like I mentioned earlier, I made a chart showcasing the exact release dates for each soundtrack on the app, and I even made a graph comparing the launch date of the app compared to today. As you can see here on this graph, there's quite a bit of growth near the ends here, and not a lot of growth in the middle. Also, yes, Virtual Boy is on this chart, and there's nothing there. I assume they'll add some soundtracks from it next year when it gets added to Virtual Console. I just added it because I assume that they will at some point. I don't know. We'll see. This middle portion here is what I like to call the big gap, and it's something other people have noticed as well. It seems like Nintendo has mostly preferred to upload newer soundtracks or legacy soundtracks. My assumption is that Nintendo has found it harder to upload these middle soundtracks because it's not really promoting anything, but they're also not what Nintendo would probably consider legacy titles, so it's just kind of this gray area for them that they aren't really sure what to do with yet. Like, over the course of the last year, we have gotten 3 soundtracks for the Wii and only 1 soundtrack for the DS. And when that app launched, there was 1 singular GameCube game. What's up with that? I did some digging online, and I found some people talking about the gap, but I couldn't really find any reasons as to why it exists. The lack of everything in between Switch and NES is kind of baffling to me. I'm hoping with the Switch 2 we start to see more GameCube games added, specifically because it's now on Virtual Console, but really it seems like they aren't coming anytime soon. We've had a whole year and gotten 3 new games since then. The fact we've gotten more Wii U games since it launched is honestly astounding to me. I just don't know. But we'll have to just wait and see. Maybe Nintendo will turn a leaf and decide to upload a bunch of GameCube games. Anyway, that's the end of my rant. Let's move on to another big point for this app. Now, this isn't really a problem I've noticed people talk about in the circles I'm in, but I'm mostly in Mario fandoms, which probably explains it. But there is a very big lack of non-Mario games on this app. For example, Kirby, which has probably some of the most amount of content in Nintendo's history aside from Pokemon and Mario, has gotten only 3 soundtracks uploaded since the app's launch. Those include Star Allies, Forgotten Land, and Kirby's Dream Land for the SNES. What's even worse is that only Forgotten Land was added since the app launched. Star Allies and Dreamland were on the app to begin with a year ago. Sure, we have gotten some bits of Air Riders, but that's not a full soundtrack. And that's just one of many Nintendo franchises that has gotten the short end of the stick. There are only 3 Metroid games on the app, 1 Pikmin game, 3 Fire Emblem games, and 3 Pokemon games. Do you know how many Mario games are on here? 33 as of the recording of this video. Keep in mind that that's if you include Donkey Kong and Yoshi, which I do. That's 10 times the amount of Pokemon soundtracks. I get that he's their mascot, but it still seems pretty unfair to not include more from other games. I'm hoping next year will bring more non-Mario games to the app. Alright, let's move on to the next biggest problem I've heard people talk about with this app. Okay, I know I just did a whole segment on how Mario has really saturated the library of this app, but now I want to talk about how there's not enough from the Mario RPGs. If there's one thing I've seen people talk about begging for this entire year, it's Mario RPGs on the app. When it first released and almost a year afterwards, there were no Mario RPGs on Nintendo Music. Finally, on October 6th, they decided to add the Thousand Year Door, and not just the original, but the remake as well. I know a lot of people who were really excited for this, and rightly so. I've even seen some people say that the app is finally worth it. But I've still seen multiple people asking for more than just one soundtrack. Hopefully in the near future, we will get one of the Mario and Luigi games or more Paper Mario. I really don't want to have to wait a whole nother year for one of these soundtracks that I absolutely adore. Finally, I've got one more subject to talk about, so let's get right into it. The last thing I want to talk about is weekly uploads. These have been very controversial and probably the number one thing people have talked about since the app launched over a year ago. For those of you who are unaware, Nintendo uploads a new soundtrack every single week at exactly 10 a.m. every Tuesday in Japan. However, there are exceptions. For example, they uploaded 26 NES games all at once on July 21st, and they didn't upload anything the week after Tears of the Kingdom soundtrack dropped. The Thousand Year Door soundtrack dropped, and they didn't upload anything after that either. So mainly it is when a large soundtrack drops that they will ignore the week afterwards, or if the soundtracks are small enough, they will upload multiples at once. A lot of people, myself included, have said that the weekly upload schedule gives them something to look forward to. I always enjoy waiting to see what the next soundtrack they upload could be because it's always a big surprise and totally unexpected. That being said, Nintendo will always choose some of the worst soundtracks ever to upload by themselves with no other content. For example, the week after the Thousand Year Door dropped, we got no new soundtrack. But they dropped the remake and the original all at the same time. So we were under the assumption that if they dropped the original, they would also drop the remake as well. However, the week after that, we got Metroid 2 for the Game Boy and not the remake. If you are not aware, Metroid 2's soundtrack mainly consists of incoherent beeps and boops that don't really form a melody in any way, shape, or form. And they actively ignored the Metroid 2 remake, even after uploading the Thousand Year Doors remake as well as the original in the same week. It felt totally inconsistent and really made a lot of people upset. Anyways, that's my rant for Nintendo Music. Over the last year, I have really enjoyed watching it, but the time has finally come. Is Nintendo Music worth it 1 year later? Honestly, I would personally say no. If you are a die-hard Nintendo fan, you will probably enjoy getting the weekly uploads and seeing new stuff come to the app, much like myself. But a lot of what you are probably listening to, the more obscure stuff, isn't really on here yet. And if you are a casual Nintendo fan, there are some mainstream games on here, but not enough to really appeal to most fans. This is a very difficult app to enjoy, in my opinion. It does a lot of really nice stuff that other apps like Spotify don't do. Being able to loop your music for an hour, or being able to tag spoilers, is just incredibly convenient and makes the app justified as its own separate thing. However, there are a lot of issues as well, and those issues are all because Nintendo refuses to upload more than one soundtrack a week. If you want more non-Mario stuff, upload more often. If you want more Mario RPGs, upload more often. If you want more Switch 2 games, upload more often. If you want a way to fill in the big gap, upload more often. Nintendo refuses to upload more than one soundtrack a week, and it's hurting them. I don't want to sound like a negative person though. I've really enjoyed following this app for the last year. I've talked about it with lots of people, and we've shared our complaints, and our enjoyments, and our playlists, and everything else in between. It has essentially brought me a whole new community of people, and was also one of the main reasons I wanted to start this channel in the first place. I have really enjoyed this app, and I've enjoyed following it. However, I don't really enjoy using it too much. There's just not enough to keep me going back. I'm hoping and praying that next year will bring more and more soundtracks. But all we can do is wait and see. Anyways, that's all the time I've got for this video. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and comment below what your favorite Nintendo soundtrack is. And as always, have a great day.